Welcome to the Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping our continent. There's a fuel price battle happening in Nigeria. Dangote Refinery cuts its petrol price to 820 naira per litre, pushing other marketers like MRS Oil and NNPC to drop their prices too. This means petrol prices now vary in different places. Is the current fuel price competition good news for Nigerians or just a temporary fix in a broken system? Nigeria's Naira is no longer moving up and down with oil prices like it used to. Now, the Naira depends more on investor confidence than oil prices. Experts think the Naira will stay around 1,556 naira per dollar by the end of the year. Is Nigeria finally reducing its dependency on oil for real? Nigeria's banks are now allowing people to use their Naira debit cards for international spending again. This move shows that access to foreign exchange is improving and helping people trust the system more. Is this a sign of Nigeria's forex situation finally getting better? Joining us today for further insight is Sheyi Owojulube. Welcome, Sheyi, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure having you. So let's start with the Dangote Refinery story. I know it's always good news when Nigerians hear that fuel prices have been cut. And it's interesting to see the dynamics that the Dangote Refinery, a private-owned refinery, has added to the competition to the market, where we see a kind of response. The Dangote refinery, when they reduce their price, we also see other marketers are forced to like reduce their prices as well. And sometimes it goes back up. I mean, over the months, we've been seeing an upwards, downwards. It keeps fluctuating, basically. What do you think of this current fuel price competition? Is it good news for Nigerians? Like they say, is it just a temporary fix? And why is it not long lasting? um what else can we expect? Are we expecting, to see this fluctuation and a final stability at some point? I mean, like economists will say, in the short term you will feel the heat, but in the long term it will be good.
Well, let me start off by saying this is what is expected when you are in a deregulated environment. A popular example that analysts use is the SIM cards when the telecommunication sector had back in the early 2000s, and SIM cards initially sold for as high as 40,000, 30,000, 50,000 naira. And today, in some instances, SIM cards are given out free of charge, right? So, what we currently have, this upward and downward movement, are the signs that the market has truly been deregulated, right? A popular example that analysts use from time to time is the telecommunications sector, which was deregulated in the early 2000s. And at the beginning, or in the early stages, we saw SIM cards sell as high as 50,000 naira in CDs. Let me try to paint a picture in our memory. It came in large CDs and all of that. But today, SIM cards come in very small packets and are sometimes given out free of charge. So at some point, I do not think that, I'm not saying that petrol will sell for almost free, but at least it will be easily accessible to Nigerians, right? In the days or in the months since the coming on stream of the Dangote Refinery, we know that that usual cycle of panic buying and petrol scarcity has not happened. We've not had that. And people can plan with the price of petrol in mind because there's been stability in the market. So this up and down movement, as you call it, is a sign that the market is deregulated. Whether or not Dangote Refinery is the main actor or the main distributor of petrol, and whether or not there is talk of monopoly, is another conversation entirely. But for now, yes, this up and down movement, as you call it, is good for Nigerians because we are sure to some extent that the government is not exactly paying subsidies anymore. So we expect to see more positive the NNPC, since the government no longer has to carry that debt or the weight of subsidizing petrol, and the market is stable. So Nigerians are assured that at any time they can go into the petrol stations and get petrol without fear.
I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned, the telecoms example. I can remember that time where SIM cards were really, really expensive. And now, I mean, you see more competition coming. And also, we can attest that we haven't had like petrol scarcity in a while as well. And I mean, these are the effects, like you mentioned, of the deregulation of the system. But I mean, also, I just wanted to point out or ask, do you feel like going forward we're going to see more players come into the market? I mean, no, we have the Dangote Refinery. You think that, I mean, with this, the opening of that market and the deregulation of it would also, draw, I mean, more Africans venturing into it, as well as foreign investors as well coming into the market to be able to, open the market wide for competition as opposed to um a monopoly.
Well, yes. So one thing to keep at the back of our minds, and we can all relate to the Dangote example, the huge costs that was sunk in getting that refinery to finally start working, and the shifting, how the shifted from 1 month to 3 months, we cannot relate. So we know that building a refinery, a modern day refinery, will cost a lot of money. We can see how the Port Harcourt refinery and the Kaduna refinery, how much the government has spent on turnaround on stream. It will happen, that will happen based, I'm not saying it's not as it stands. We have the beach, so it will stream in another two staking. Some of the things that contributed. So whether or not we'll see more investors coming to refining in Nigeria will be a matter of the financial weights or the financial abilities of those investors. We cannot relate to how much and how long it took for the Dangote refinery to finally start operations. But at the moment, we have the BUA refinery that is being constructed. In January this year, the BUA group told us that, well, the refinery is progressing, but it's not yet at 90% completion. That refinery is smaller than the Dangote refinery. It's a 200,000 barrels capacity, refining capacity per day, right? So it's smaller than the Dangote refinery, but when that stream in a few years, maybe 3 to 4 years, I don't work for the BUA group, but I can say when that refinery comes on stream, that would be added advantage to Nigeria and Nigeria's economy. But beyond the BUA refinery and the Dangote refinery, There are other smaller refineries. We have the Walter Smith refinery, and there are some modular refineries that were constructed and encouraged by the federal government during the time when Ibe Kachuku was a Minister of Petroleum Resources, Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, right? And I mean, the GMD for the NNPC. So you have those smaller refineries that can take care of other petrochemicals. So all of this would eventually contribute to Nigeria's refining capacity and the economy in general. So yes, other investors will and can come into the market. Beyond refining locally, it would not be surprising if we see some independent oil marketers come together to import refined petrol, right? As long as it meets the quality specifications agreed by ECOWAS countries earlier this year. So it would not be surprising if we see all of that. But ultimately, what happens at the end of the day is that the consumers are better for it because then they can choose which to go for. And I would not be surprised if at the end of the day, Nigeria's downstream sector, which is the retail segment of the petroleum industry, gets to the point where, like in developed countries, you can have pumps at the filling stations labeled based on the quality of petrol dispensed at each pump. So I hope we get there because then at that time, the consumer will be spoiled for choice.
I mean, we all look forward to that day we were spoiled for choice, especially when it comes to petroleum. Um, I mean, still on the petroleum news, but this is the Naira shift from is all dependent. Um, as the Naira becomes less tied to the oil prices in Nigeria, do you think that we are, as a nation, we are finally on the path of
Yes, from
building a more resilient economy?
yes, this did not just happen overnight, right? I remember that in May this year, yes, at one of the Monetary Policy Committee meetings, the CBN Governor Yemi Cardoso said that the volatility in the of a because and he attributed it back then to the monetary and fiscal reforms that had been undertaken. So he was saying that the FX reforms were beginning to yield fruit. And so at the time, the CBN governor said that the volatility in the market about 4% to below 0.5%. And so what we have seen is that despite the conflict, or should I say the war between Israel and Iran, and the drop and upward movement in crude oil prices in the market, the Naira has not suffered significantly. So we own. And so, back to the refinery conversation that we were having, at the point when Nigeria was importing refined petrol, we had to use dollars earned from crude oil to import petrol. And so we did not have a lot of FX left. But the fact that the Dangote Refinery has come on stream has given the government some breathing room. And the CBN now has a little bit more FX to play around with and ensure that the market is stable. Also, we've seen an increase in the export of non-oil materials. So there is a little bit of wiggle room that the government has and the CBN has to ensure that the Naira is stable.
We're seeing the Naira stabilize at a around the level of 150. It hasn't gone up 150, 150, 156. Experts are predicting that it would remain like that by the end of the year. Is this a sign of progress, or control? Do you think that it's still volatile and there will still weakness like the Naira rise? Or do you think that it will be, as experts are saying, to stay on 1556, or it's going to drop? We're going to see a drop.
When you mentioned an exchange rate of 150 naira to the dollar, you took my mind back to the the good luck Jonathan regime when the exchange rate was around 121 and 50 naira to the dollar. But today, the naira traded at around 1,530 to the dollar, right? So will it hold and remain an event, global event that will shake up the world, except in the case, God forbid, of a pandemic? But there such events that would shake up the world significantly and shake the global economy. We do not see that happening. So yes, it's like the Naira maintain this rate. Also, it's that the devaluation that happened is yielding fruit, and so some experts believe that the naira is currently undervalued, so meaning that it should trade even lower than what is currently trading at. And so foreign investors are taking advantage of that to bring in money, and we've seen the numbers regarding the foreign portfolio investment inflows the economy. And so foreign investors advantage of the current. So right now, what we're seeing is that the naira, as you pointed out, has remained stable despite the decline, slight decline in crude oil prices, meaning that the naira is pulling it. We expect that will continue, that trend will continue, especially because in the short term, we do not see any major global incident, any incident that will affect the global economy and the crude oil market, except in the unforeseeable and hopefully unlikely event of a pandemic or a war, right? So what we currently see is that because the naira is seeming stable, investors for those are some of the things that are helping the naira remain stable despite the up and down movements of.
Our final story. I mean, it's interesting now that Nigerians can now use their their Nigerian cards abroad. I mean, there was a time where Nigerian banks suspended the use of our Naira cards abroad. So now that is back. With the Naira cards not working abroad again, does this mean that Nigerians' forex liquidity has genuinely improved? And does this move restore, I mean, Nigerians' confidence, the users' confidence in the financial system, or is it simply, just cosmetic? Is it going to be like it? Is it going to be temporal? Will they still take it back again? I mean, just what are your thoughts on this the lift of the ban?
Yes, so the fact that Naira cards can now work again for international payments is a sign that our FX liquidity has improved. As I was saying for the last topic that we discussed, right? So because of the current situation of the Naira confidence and international in opening lines of credit for Nigerian payments or payments from Nigerian The fact that this has happened is a sign that the FX liquidity has improved. The fact that FX liquidity has improved now also does not mean that you can walk into any branch and demand for to withdraw dollar cash or FX cash. You still have some banks saying that they don't have FX, but at least the situation is improving. Are we there yet? No, we're not. It's a work in progress. And this momentum has to be sustained, right? All of the reforms that are currently being undertaken, the tax reforms, the monetary policy reforms, has to be sustained. All these reforms have to be sustained. I mean, to make sure that Nigerians can continue to be connected, so to speak, to the world, to the rest of the world, if I may put it like that, because a situation where Naira cards did not work for international payments meant that some tech companies had to start offering virtual cards and opening us to risk of data, made us susceptible to data leakages and data scraping, right? Because people were signing up for all sorts to be able to make international payments. But we believe our banking system is secure to some extent. So people can safely carry out international transactions. That being said, we know how the political landscape is in Nigeria. So 2027 is around the corner, and the politicking has already started with all the talks of the coalition and all of that. So it remains to be seen how the wind will blow and how the tides will go in 2027, whether it will still be the Tinubu administration or another administration will come into power and come with their own set of policies. But all in all, we hope that Nigeria will be better for it at the end of the day.
Hopefully, I mean this week I mean all the stories basically are like intertwined. I mean, if you look at how we started with the Dangote Refinery drop, the Naira also no longer being linked to the oil, and now you see the banks. I mean, this feels like progress that we're making in Nigeria. So hopefully, like you said, we look forward to more sustained development in the coming years and weeks as well. Thank you very much, Shay, for joining us today. Um, to all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. For deeper insight into our work, you can visit our website at sbmintel.com. Don't forget to connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. That's all for today. Thank you for listening.